Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Tryxt, and today I wanted to bring you a quick build video guide on the Detonate Dead Necromancer that I'm going to be starting with in 3.13 for the solo self-found hardcore Maven race that's upcoming in the new Echoes of the Atlas and Ritual League expansion that's going on. So I played this character before. I actually played it in the Delve race in hardcore, which I got to depth 420, I think, blaze it. And got to level 100 actually in the Heist Flashback Hardcore League as well. I did Trade League for the first time in a while. I still treat it mostly as SSF, but I ended up getting number 1 Necro and number 5 overall. Technically, actually, their number 1 Necro is in solo self-found hardcore, but he was playing the same build, so you know it's a good one. This build, actually, I got the original concept from Pack_HC. Go check him out. He has a fantastic Twitch channel at www.twitch.tv/Pack_HC. And Waggle had also played this build as well in the Gauntlet race and got second place overall. So again, this is a phenomenal build, and it really hasn't changed very much for 3.13. The only change that it had was very minor damage reduction and very minor max mana reduction. But I mean, honestly, those are kind of inconsequential. The build's still phenomenal, and we're going to get most of that back from Harvest Crafting anyways. So perfectly fine. All right, so let's just jump into a map real quick and I can show you what it looks like in mapping. This is a T12 map. This isn't standard, so it's a shaped map back when those existed. But anyways, I built this character primarily for mapping just because it was a really fast mapper with very little investment required. So this is what the basics of it looks like when mapping. This is again with impulses, so if you want extra clear speed, impulses is nice because the explosions associated with it. But what we're doing actually is we're desecrating in front of a pack, then detonate deading, and since we're using Unleash, we're hoping that the Unleash then explodes the next mobs that are created, or the next corpses that are created by killing the first few mobs that we're killing with the Desecrate and Detonate Dead. But anyways, this is basically what it looks like in mapping. Again, it's fast. It's not as fast as some builds are going to be compared to, you know, a build in standard that you're going to find, or a build in softcore that's a glass cannon and that has a lot of investment. But with very little investment, this clears very fast and feels very smooth when mapping. So let's go into the POB then real quick. So in the notes portion, I put a fairly comprehensive, not really a step-by-step, but at least a leveling portion, a portion where I talk about the pros and cons of this build, etc., etc. So we can go over that together real quick if you'd like. Number one, the way this build works is we're going to be scaling. There's two components first off for Detonate Dead. There's a spell damage component and there is a corpse explosion component. So the spell damage component does flat fire damage based off of the level of the skill. And the corpse explosion portion is what we're actually going to be scaling, which is much more substantial. It looks like it's less damage on the POB. However, once you actually take into account the percentage HP scaling from the corpse itself, because each corpse has it, or each mob has a different percent HP associated with them, that number grows exponentially. So when I say it's based off of the corpse's HP, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using Desecrate, highest level we can possibly get it, obviously. Level 20 will give you level 100 corpses, so perfect. Don't have to try and get a level 21 or anything. And then we're going to be using the Val Detonate Dead variant just because Val DD, when you actually utilize the Val portion, it does a higher percentage. But otherwise, when mapping, it's just regular old Detonate Dead that we're using. So, since we're going to be scaling the corpse portion of the damage, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be bringing Specters into the map with us. We're going to grab 2 Specters with as high percentage HP bonuses as we can. I have that in the POB as well down at the bottom, which Specters you're going to be choosing. So that'll be within this note section here at the very bottom. But since we're bringing those into the map, the way that Desecrate works is it brings whatever Specters you have brought into the map are now part of that map's Desecrate pool. So since we're bringing in our own Specters, whatever mobs are in the map are still going to be spawned through our Desecrate. However, they're going to be diluted and they're going to be replaced partially with the 2 Specters that we bring in. So therefore, we're kind of guaranteeing ourselves a smaller Desecrate pool with better mobs in there to just do more damage. So that's our main offensive abilities. It's going to be scaled off of fire damage, elemental damage, percent as extra chaos damage, etc. The spell damage again portion doesn't actually assist with the corpse explosion portion of Detonate Dead, so that's why we take minimal spell damage on the tree. As far as defensive layers go, we have a very high HP pool. As you can tell, this is the character, by the way, that I brought in from the Heist Flashback. I played it, again, primarily solo self-found in hardcore, so these numbers are very realistic for you to be able to achieve almost on an SSF basis. And with Harvest Crafting being back in the game, you should be able to reach this fairly easily. So we had 7k life, which is a good chunk of life. We had Mind Over Matter as well. We are going to be stun immune due to Unwavering Stance on the tree. This character wasn't ailment immune because I didn't require it. I was already shock immune from using impulses because I was doing this, again, just for clear speed. But of course, this variant going forward, we're going to be ailment immune as well because we can get that off of the Syndicate craft along with the craft that we get from Siege Map. That's the one. Anyways, so ailment immune as well. We're also going to have a cast when damage taken set up with level 20 Steel Skin. We use level 20 cast when damage taken because that way it doesn't proc unnecessarily. The lower cast when damage taken that you have, the more often it's going to be proccing based off the amount of damage that you receive. That's the way that the gem works. However, it has an internal cooldown, so you want it to be a little bit higher because you are going to be taking fairly big hits every so often, and then it'll proc. You don't want it proccing off little hits which are inconsequential and don't matter. On top of that, we're almost going to be block capped as well. As you can see here on the tree, or on the POB, pardon, it's 60% block chance, 60% spell block chance. This is currently without our Rumi's Concoction up. That's going to increase to nearly max spell block as well with maximum attack block. Now, again, this chest is in pulses is what I was using since I was just going for clear speed. I will be switching to a hunter influence chest where I can get increased effective offerings on the player, which will then basically cap me out for spell block as well. So with those layers of defense, and it's obscenely tanky. So again, pros and cons for this build though. Oh, I forgot to mention, we're also going to have nearly permanent fortify. The way that we acquire this is by having the Vigil gem, the Vigil jewel, and utilizing General's Cry. If you link General's Cry with Vigilant Strike and you have the Vigil, nearby allies also gain fortify. Since General's Cry is linked to the Vigilant Strike, when you use General's Cry, the mobs summoned by it will actually use Vigilant Strike and therefore give you Fortify. Due to the increased effectiveness of all of that, you're going to have Fortify for about, increased duration of all that. You're going to have Fortify for about 35 seconds approximately. So you have nearly permanent Fortify as long as you remember every 35 seconds to cast General's Cry. Fairly easy to do. Now, pros and cons of this build. Number one, amazing league starter. Absolutely fantastic league starter. It's going to have very minimal investment required to be able to get to red maps and kill conquerors. So great to start a league off with. It's extremely tanky for the level of investment. Again, I named all of the defensive layers it has, basically all of them. And it's a relatively fast mapper and has the capacity to do bosses. Now, the cons of it, again, it's difficult doing bosses because of how I mentioned how the Desecrate pool works. So for big bosses such as Cortex, Shaper, Cirrus, Uberat Ziri, things like that, your Desecrate pool is going to be stretched a little bit thin. However, what you can do is you can reduce that Desecrate pool, again, by bringing Specters into the map. So what you'll have to do is use Queen's Decree along with a Spectre chest to get 4 Specters, bring 4 into the map, exit the map, grab another 4 Specters, bring those into the map. So in order to expedite this process on bosses, what you can do is create something that's known as a Spectre Bank. It just involves creating a level 28 PvP character, putting the Raise Spectre gem on that character, and bringing it to your hideout after desecrating on your main character, and then just raise spectering those corpses that you want as specters. So that'll save 2 of them on one character. You log off that character, don't have to log into it again until you actually want to bring those corpses into that map. So you just log onto that character, desecrate. Since those 2 specters are in that character's desecrate pool, they'll be in your hideout's desecrate pool, and then you can just raise them on the main character and bring them into the map. this just kind of expedites the process and makes it a little bit faster when trying to do those bosses. So you can do tricks like that to make this a little bit easier, but it is cumbersome to do those bosses because of this whole lowering the desecrate pool to only having good mobs in it. So that can be kind of a pain, but that's just, again, for very big bosses. You won't have to do that for conquerors at all. The damage is sufficient. The only other issue that I find is if you're an SSF player and you're not that well versed, it does require Uberlab and Triggercast in order to be able to get your bone offering up consistently. Otherwise, you'll have to self-cast your bone offering, and without Uberlab, you won't have Mistress of Sacrifice. You can choose to take instead of Essence Glutton, but personally, I would rather take Essence Glutton first. Otherwise, again, there's no real massive downsides to this build. Now in the notes section over here, I have given you all of this information. I've also given you a massive leveling portion. I won't go over that in the video, but we're simply just going to be doing the staple leveling as it is currently, and it hasn't really been changed over for 3.13. Maybe there'll be something new that people will discover. But for now, we're going to be using Stormblast Mine and Orb of Storms. We're going to use that all the way up until level 28 when we switch over to Cremation and Armageddon Brand. Personally, I find that these are the fastest leveling abilities in the game by far. And I provide you with leveling trees as well. So the leveling trees, basically one for Mervale. This is the 43-point tree is approximately when you're going to have normal lab, approximately when you have cruel lab, and then approximately when you're going to be switching over into DD, and then kind of approximately when you have Merc lab as well. So they're approximates based off of that, not quite exact, because you'll most likely be at those points just slightly before that tree, but at least it gives you an idea of where you're going to be going to. Now as well in this notes portion, I give you a gearing priority. Again, as I mentioned, a lot of our damage scaling is going to be coming off of percentage fire damage as extra chaos damage, and less from specific spell damage, because again, we are scaling the Detonate Dead portion, the corpse explosion portion of that, rather than the initial spell hit. So keep that in mind. We do take spiritual aid as well on the tree. Now what spiritual aid is it causes any increases or decreases in minion damage to also affect the player. Now that's generic damage. So if you have a bunch of increased minion damage, you are going to just be getting percentage scaling towards your corpse explosion portion and the spell damage portion as well. But again, more importantly, that corpse explosion portion. So please go look over that portion of the gearing priority if you're confused on the gearing. Now, I also have a section of what I would do differently in Ritual League, because again, this character that I brought into the POB was from a league where I was just pushing to 100. So number one, as I already mentioned, ailment immunity. I would definitely look into getting ailment immunity. If you get the ailment craft on your gloves, helm, chest, and utilize arcane swiftness, which is in the top right portion of the tree, which is on that skill tree, you'll be ailment immune. Great, easy. And then there's some other little portions where, you know, I mentioned that I would do a hunter chest instead, which we already talked about. I'd probably switch into a soul tether because we're going to have a fairly high hybrid ES pool as well. And overleech with that would be really nice to have. Lastly, we go over the top specters at the bottom here. We do have Primal Crush Claws from Harvest. Those should be back now that Harvest is back in the game, but otherwise we got them from Phantasmal Desecrate in 3.12. They have 1200% HP scaling, which is insane. Otherwise, Lithomancers and Stone Skin Flayers from Primeval Ruins in Delve, which is all cities. So you can find them down there. Otherwise, 3 from Heist that are very, very easy to get, even though I do know Heist will be slightly rare. Still shouldn't be a problem, at least grabbing those 3. Again, these are mainly for when you're going to be bossing. You're going to have these 2 or a combination of one of these or 2 of these. But the rest of them are going to be brought into zones when you do boss. You'll have to bring those in. So if you're doing things like Legion battles or Cirrus or Uber at Ziri, that's when you're going to have to worry about this. Otherwise, just bring the 2 Specters that you usually have, and that should be, you know, good enough damage for most of the encounters. If you're looking for more information about what the highest HP Specters are in the game, you can always check out This Is Badger Gaming's video on that. It's This Is Badger Gaming on YouTube or on Twitch. He did make a video about the highest HP Specters in the game and his trials and tribulations through finding which ones are the highest HP. It might be slightly outdated because it has been 2 patches since, But it's a really good video if you're looking to deep dive into the information that Path of Exile doesn't exactly hand you. All right, that's the bulk of it. If you do have any questions, check out the notes section again of the POB first, but otherwise come on down to www.twitch.tv/Tryxt. I'm going to be playing this build at the release of the new league and the new expansion as well. So if you have questions, come on by and ask them there. Try and check the POB first because the majority of it will be in there. If you are asking questions that are already answered in the POB, I'll probably just answer them anyways because what else I got to do? But yeah, enjoy the new content, enjoy the league release. If you guys do have any feedback about the guide, this is basically the first actual guide aside from a build showcase that I've done in the past. So any feedback, would love to hear it. So either leave that here in the comment section or leave that in the Twitch channel. Make sure you like and subscribe. Have fun at release. We'll see you then. Bye.